Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to share my story with you today. This isn't just any ordinary story. This is the story of how I followed my dream to Paris, learned English, and changed my life. I want to tell you something really important. If you have a dream, no matter how big or small, never give up on it. You can do anything if you believe in yourself. This is my journey, and I hope it inspires you to chase your own dreams. Let me take you back to the beginning. My name is Daniel. I'm 25 years old, and I come from a small town. Ever since I was a child, I dreamed of seeing the world, the big cities, the famous landmarks, the cultures. I wanted to experience everything. But in my town, not many people talked about dreams like that. Most people stayed, found jobs nearby, and lived a simple life. But I wanted more. I wanted to explore, learn new things, and make something special of my life. One day, I watched a travel video about Paris. The Eiffel Tower, the charming streets, the little cafes. It looked so magical. That was the moment I knew. I have to go to Paris. But there was one problem. I didn't speak English very well, and I didn't know any French, so how would I survive in Paris? When I told my parents about my dream, they didn't understand at first. Paris? How will you get there? You don't even speak English well enough, my mom said. You're still learning, my dad added. Why not just stay here and focus on your job? But I didn't let their doubts stop me. I believed in myself, and I kept talking to them about my dream every day. I told them that I would learn English, work hard, and go to Paris for a new opportunity. At first, they were still unsure, but I didn't stop. I kept showing them how serious I was. One day, I decided to show them something. I picked up my phone and started practicing English aloud in front of them. I read out loud from an English book, repeating new words and sentences. I was nervous, but I didn't care. Slowly, my parents began to see that I was committed to my dream. That night, I sat with them and said, I really want to go to Paris. This is my dream, and I'll make it happen. To my surprise, my mom smiled and said, If this is your dream, then go for it. My dad nodded, and for the first time, I felt that they believed in me. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but now I had their support. The next few months were busy. I applied to a university in Paris, worked part-time to save money, and practiced English every single day. I followed a simple routine that made a big difference. Morning. I practiced speaking by reading books or newspapers aloud. Afternoon. I listened to English podcasts or watched English movies to improve my understanding. Evening. I wrote short stories in English to practice my writing. There were many days when I made mistakes. Sometimes I didn't know how to say something or I felt embarrassed. But each time I just kept going. I knew that mistakes were part of the journey. Slowly, I became more confident in my English skills. Finally, the day arrived. I received my acceptance letter from the university in Paris. I couldn't believe it. I was really going to Paris. The day I left for Paris, I felt both excited and nervous. My parents packed my bags with love. My mom gave me a small notebook saying, Write down everything you learn and everything you experience in Paris. At the airport, I felt a mix of emotions, nervous but so happy. I said goodbye to my parents with a promise, I'll make you proud. The plane took off, and as I looked out of the window, I thought, this is it. My dream is finally coming true. When I arrived in Paris, everything felt new and exciting. The streets were full of life, people were speaking French all around me, and the buildings looked amazing. But I quickly realized one thing. I had to use English to survive. From ordering food to asking for directions, I needed to speak English everywhere. The first time I asked for a coffee, I was so nervous. My words came out slowly and I made a mistake in my sentence. But the cashier smiled and said, "No problem, take your time." I felt relieved. That night, as I sat by the window of my small apartment looking at the Eiffel Tower, I couldn't believe how far I'd come. I had made it to Paris, but now the real challenge was just beginning. When I woke up on my second day in Paris, the sun was shining through the window, casting a warm glow over the room. I could hear the sounds of the city outside, people talking, cars passing by, and the occasional honk of a horn. It felt like a dream, but at the same time, everything was so real. I had finally made it to Paris, and now I had to face the biggest challenge of all, learning English. Sure, I had learned a few words and phrases back home, but here, in the heart of the city, I would have to use English every day. The pressure was on. I had no choice but to dive in. I had to speak English to buy groceries, ask for directions, and communicate with the people around me. It was scary at first. What if I made a mistake? What if they couldn't understand me? But I knew I couldn't run away from this. If I wanted to succeed, I had to push through my fears. My first task was simple. I needed food. It wasn't just about eating. It was about surviving in a new place. So I decided to go to the local market. I made a list in my notebook translating everything from my native language into English. Apples, bread, milk, cheese, nothing too complicated. I walked into the store feeling nervous. The moment I stepped inside, I felt a little lost. There were so many people and everyone seemed to be moving so fast. I took a deep breath and walked toward the fruits and vegetables. "Excuse me?" I said, trying to sound confident. The shopkeeper turned to me. "How much is this apple?" She looked at me for a second, confused. I repeated myself, a little louder. "How much is this apple?" She smiled and replied in slow English. €1. I couldn't believe it. I had just successfully used English to ask a question and get an answer. It was a small win, but it felt huge. I continued through the store, repeating the same process for everything on my list. The more I practiced, the more confident I became. By the time I was ready to pay, I was feeling much better. I even managed to ask for a bag in English, and the cashier replied with a friendly smile. That day, I felt like a small victory had been achieved. I wasn't perfect, but I was trying, and that was the most important thing. The next day, I decided to enroll in an English language class. I found a language school not far from my apartment and walked in, hoping they would accept me. The school had a friendly atmosphere, and everyone spoke English with different accents. I signed up for a beginner's class, and I was ready to get serious about learning. The first day of class was a bit overwhelming. There were people from all over the world, Spain, Japan, Brazil, and even Russia. We all came to Paris for different reasons, but one thing brought us together: our desire to learn English. The teacher, Ms. Sarah, was kind and patient. She started with simple words and phrases, explaining everything clearly. At first, I felt like I was the slowest in the class. Some of the others were already more fluent than me. They spoke with confidence, and I couldn't help but compare myself to them. But Ms. Sarah noticed this and encouraged me, saying, "Don't worry, Daniel. Everyone learns at their own pace. Just keep practicing and you'll get better." Her words made me feel better. I knew she was right. I had to stop comparing myself to others and focus on my own progress. I began taking notes, paying extra attention to pronunciation, and practicing after class. I would listen to English podcasts on the way home, repeating what I had learned. It was hard work, but I was determined. As the weeks went by, I started to make new friends in class. One of them, Maria from Brazil, became my study partner. She had been learning English for a while, and we spent hours after class practicing together. Sometimes we would meet at a cafe near the school, sitting with our notebooks and coffee cups, writing down new words and phrases. We would laugh at our mistakes, but we never stopped trying. Maria taught me one important lesson. Mistakes are not something to be afraid of. Every mistake is a step forward, she would say with a smile. And I started to believe her. I wasn't perfect, but every time I made a mistake, I learned something new. Outside of class, I made an effort to use English in every situation. I practiced ordering food in English at restaurants, asking for help on the streets, and talking to people in the parks. Sometimes the locals didn't understand me completely, but they were always patient, and that made me feel comfortable. One afternoon, I went to a cafe to read a book in English. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching people walk by. A woman sat down at the table next to me and smiled. She was reading a book in English as well, and I noticed that it was the same book I had been reading. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm reading the same book. How are you liking it?" To my surprise, she answered in perfect English. "Oh, it's wonderful. What part are you on?" We began talking about the book, and soon we were talking about all sorts of things: Paris, travel, language, and life. This was the first time I had a real conversation in English, and it felt amazing. We exchanged phone numbers and we promised to meet again. That was a turning point for me. I realized that English wasn't just a language I was learning. It was becoming a part of my life. Months passed, and my English improved every day. I could see the progress I was making. I could speak to people without feeling nervous, and I could understand almost everything I read or heard. But more than that, I had gained something more valuable: confidence. I was no longer afraid to speak up. I had learned that mistakes were not something to be ashamed of. They were part of the process. With each mistake, I grew stronger, and with every small victory, I felt closer to my dream. One day, I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking at the Eiffel Tower in the distance. It had been almost a year since I first arrived in Paris. I had made it. I had learned English. I had built a new life for myself. It wasn't just about the language. It was about the courage to follow my dreams, the patience to keep going, and the belief that I could do it, even when it seemed impossible. Paris had become my home, and English had become my bridge to the world. The sun was beginning to set over Paris, casting a golden hue across the city. I sat by my window, looking at the Eiffel Tower. It had been a year since I arrived in this beautiful city, and in that time, I had faced so many challenges. I had left behind everything I knew, stepped into the unknown, and learned a new language from scratch. But now, everything felt different. The fear that once held me back had disappeared. I could speak English confidently, and I was no longer just a visitor in Paris. It felt like home. One evening, I received a call from a friend back home. His name was Ahmed, and we had been friends for years. He knew how much I struggled with English, and he had always supported me. "Daniel, how's Paris? How's your English?" he asked excitedly. I smiled and replied, "It's amazing, Ahmed. I can speak English without feeling nervous now. I can understand movies, I can talk to people, and I even dream in English sometimes." He laughed and said, "That's incredible. You've come so far." His words made me feel proud. I had worked so hard to get to this point, but there were still moments when I doubted myself. It wasn't easy. There were times when I wanted to give up, when I felt overwhelmed, and when the progress seemed so slow. But now, I knew I had made it. The next day, something unexpected happened. I had been asked to speak at an event for new students at the language school. The director of the school, Ms. Sarah, invited me because I had improved so much. She wanted me to share my story and inspire others who were just starting their English journey. At first, I was scared. How could I speak in front of a group of people, especially when I was still learning? What if I made a mistake? But then I remembered everything I had been through. I remembered how I started, nervous and unsure. I remembered the first time I tried to speak to someone in English and how proud I felt when I understood them. I realized that this was a moment to share my journey and show others that they too could do it. The day of the event, I stood in front of the crowd. My heart was racing and I could feel the butterflies in my stomach. But I took a deep breath and started speaking. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I want to share my story with you. A year ago, I didn't know much English. I was scared, nervous, and unsure of myself. But I decided to take a step, to move to Paris, and to learn. It wasn't easy. There were times when I wanted to give up, but I didn't. I kept practicing, even when it was hard. And now, here I am. The crowd was silent, listening intently. I continued, telling them about my first grocery shopping experience, the challenges I faced at school, and how I had learned to embrace mistakes. I shared the importance of taking small steps every day, even when the progress didn't seem obvious. I told them about the moment when I realized that English wasn't just a language, it was a tool that opened doors to the world. As I spoke, I could feel a shift inside me. I wasn't just telling a story anymore. I was living it. I was no longer the person who was afraid to speak or who doubted his abilities. I was someone who had fought for his dreams and had won. The students in the audience were nodding, some of them smiling, others even taking notes. After I finished speaking, there was a long pause. Then, the applause started. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was real appreciation. I felt a rush of emotion. It was like the whole room was celebrating my journey with me. I had come so far, and I had done it. As I walked out of the event, Ms. Sarah came over to me. You did a wonderful job, Daniel. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, I said, feeling grateful. I couldn't have done it without all the help I've received along the way. Keep going, she said. You have so much potential. I can see you doing great things. Her words stuck with me. I had spent so much time focusing on the language, on getting it right, but now I realized that English was just the beginning. It was the bridge to something much bigger. It was the key to my dreams, to my future. After that event, I decided to take a new step. I wanted to work with people who didn't speak English well and help them just like I had been helped. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching English to new immigrants. It felt incredible to give back. I could see the same nervousness in their eyes that I had once had. But I knew deep down that they could do it too. They just needed to believe in themselves. Every day I practiced speaking English with my students, helping them build their confidence, just like I had built mine. They would make mistakes and I would smile, telling them, "It's okay. Mistakes are how we learn. Keep going." Over time, my life in Paris became everything I had dreamed of and more. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. I could communicate with anyone, travel anywhere, and I had built meaningful relationships with people from all over the world. The real victory was not in speaking perfect English or never making a mistake. The real victory was in overcoming my fears, pushing through the tough times and never giving up. The real victory was in learning that no matter how hard the journey was, the most important thing was to keep moving forward. I had learned English, but more importantly, I had learned to believe in myself. One afternoon, as I was walking down the streets of Paris, I thought back to my first days here. I had been so scared, so uncertain of my future. But now, I was walking with my head held high, smiling at the people I passed, and feeling proud of everything I had accomplished. I knew that this was just the beginning. I had dreams that reached beyond Paris, beyond learning English. I wanted to travel the world, speak to people from every corner of the earth, and continue to grow. And most importantly, I wanted to share my story with others so they could see that anything was possible if they were willing to put in the work, to face their fears, and to never give up. Because no matter where you come from or how hard the road may seem, you have the power to change your life. You just have to keep going. If you're reading this right now, I want you to remember one thing. Your dreams are possible. It doesn't matter where you start, how many mistakes you make, or how many times you feel like giving up. What matters is that you keep moving forward. Every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to the life you want. Look at my journey. I started with fear, uncertainty, and doubt. I had moments when I felt like quitting, when the road seemed too hard. But I didn't give up. I kept learning. I kept pushing. And slowly but surely, things started to change. The key to success is simple. Never stop believing in yourself. You are capable of achieving your dreams. The only limit is the one you place on yourself. If you take one small action today, tomorrow you will be closer to your goal. Keep your vision clear, your heart strong, and your mind focused. And remember, the journey is just as important as the destination. Enjoy every moment because that's where the real growth happens. So, if you're feeling unsure or scared right now, take a deep breath. You've got this. And if you ever feel like you can't go on, just think about how far you've already come. Every challenge you face is just another step toward greatness. As you move forward, don't forget to help others along the way. Share your story, your experiences, and encourage those who might be struggling just like you once were. Because together, we all rise higher. If you found this story inspiring and it gave you the motivation to chase your dreams, don't forget to like, comment, and share. Let others hear this message and remind them that they can do it too. And if you haven't already, subscribe so you can keep getting more stories that inspire, motivate, and help you achieve your goals. Remember, your dreams are waiting for you. Go chase them.